Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios on Campus Corner. George, we made it. It's the end of the preseason. We figured we would jump on the YouTube show today and kind of take a look, a big picture look at everything that's going on. Oklahoma is basically wrapped up with the preseason. That's what I think we should term it, because they start school on Monday, George, and everything gets moved to the evenings. A little bit of normalcy as Oklahoma enters into the actual football season.
Yeah, we're 15 days away. I think that they had a scrimmage on Wednesday.
Yep.
I believe they have another one on Saturday. And then I believe once school starts on Monday, it turns into game prep. I'm sure they'll do some other things, but they're going to start watching film. Arkansas State, obviously the season opener, September 2nd. We're that close, folks. So I think that's, when school starts, that's when fall camp really kind of ends, and they start getting into more preparing for games. They won't be doing scrimmages and things like that.
Yeah, you can tell that the town of Norman is starting to get a little bit of a buzz as everybody gets back into town. So, all right, what I wanted to do today was let's take a look at some of the position groups. And I know that we have we've gone over plenty of, who's standing out, who's kind of being a guy right now for everybody that is, the position groups that are excelling. Let's focus on that. And in terms of a position group that you've been pleasantly surprised with, we've gone out to 3 practices so far. Yep. You can't really tell just a ton, but you can get a good idea of, and as well as on top of scrimmages and who's performing well in those. What position group did maybe that you didn't feel great about going into the spring or into the preseason, but now you feel like is starting to come on?
Yeah, for me, it's the offensive line. I think that's a group that you lose those 2 starting tackles in Anton Harrison and Wanye Morris to the NFL draft. You come back, you say, okay, what are they going to do at those spots? They go out, they get a Walter Rouse from Stanford, but what does he really look like in the spring and in the fall? Obviously, he didn't practice a ton in spring practice, but now he's back out there and healthy. They have a lot of faith in Tyler Guyton. I think there's some question marks on the internal offensive line, right? I think when you look at Andrew Raym, what does he look like? He's been healthy. I think it's been really his first spring, summer, and fall camp to stay healthy throughout. So could he have a big year? McCade Matwire, it sounds like, had a really good fall camp. And then Savion Byrd, that was kind of that question mark at left guard. Can he take on that position and be that starter that a lot of people think he can be? He had a great bowl game, but that's all we had seen him before. So for him to come out and kind of, it sounds like he's won that job, I think is really good news. Now, I am still concerned a little bit about the depth there.
Right.
They need to get Jacob Sexton back, kind of be that swing tackle. They need to figure out who's that backup center, some of those guard spots. But they have bodies there. But that's just a position group that you always wonder, what are they going to look like? And I still don't know. That's usually how it comes together. Bill Beanbuzz, offensive lines usually don't come together until a few games in. But I think that they feel really good about that starting 5, and it sounds like they've been pretty good in those scrimmages so far.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see how Jake Taylor fits into the plans,
yeah,
how a Troy Everett fits into the plans, how a Caleb Schaefer fits into the plans, because at some point you are going to need those guys. There is going to be a need for depth, and the one thing that does scare you a little bit is that tackle position. We've talked about it before. Once you get past Walter Rouse, once you get past Tyler Guyton on the 2 bookends, Caden Green's obviously going to have a very bright future in Norman. But do you want him thrown out there in the first 3 games of the season?
Right, and that's why I said Jacob Sexton. They really want to get him back. It sounds like he's progressing really well, but until he gets out there, what does that really look like? You mentioned Jake Taylor. That's a guy that sounds like he's playing some guard. They also popped him out to tackle a little bit. Caleb Schaefer back in the spring, they also had him play some tackle. So they're moving some guys around there. And again, I just trust Bill Beanbo to get it done. It just sounds like it's progressed further along. They've stayed healthy up front so far. So I just feel way better about that group heading into the season than maybe I did a few weeks ago.
Yeah, it sounds like in that first scrimmage, Oklahoma was really able to run the ball. It sounds like the defensive line answered back a little bit in that second scrimmage. And I don't know, maybe that's what you want. You want to see a little give and take in the interior or in the trenches from both sides.
Yeah.
For me, I think the group that I'm really looking at is a group that we had a lot of question marks about, and it's the wide receiver group. You know what you're going to get, or you think you know what you're going to get with Jalil Farouk. Drake Stoops is a constant. Gavin Freeman is certainly having a a really good preseason. But for me, it's the emergence of somebody like an Andrell Anthony. I think that is going to be a key factor for Dylan Gabriel. It's going to be a key factor for Emmett Jones moving forward. And you just want to be able to build a bunch of guys that you feel like you can go into the season and have a little bit of confidence about. And I want to be able to see a guy like a Nick Anderson. He's made a lot of plays in the scrimmages. It sounds like, just in the limited time that we've been able to see him, he makes a lot of plays as well. So, where does Jaden Gibson fit into the mix? Hopefully, Brennan Thompson's continuing to progress off of the injury that he sustained about a week and a half ago. But who else are going to be those guys that Dylan Gabriel or a Jackson Arnold can contribute, can count on when you need to pick up that 3rd and 7 or 3rd and extended? Who's going to be able to go make a play? You think it's going to be Jalil Farouk. And it's kind of weird, too, that we haven't heard a whole lot about Jalil Farouk. Yep. Maybe that's a good thing, though. Maybe that's a good thing that he just continues to show up every day and progress in a certain way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's a guy that can be the leading receiver of this group, but I think there's other guys that are going to maybe vie for that position. I think that you've got an Andrell Anthony, who that's a name that continues to come up. A Petaway, who I feel like we talk about.
That's a name that I didn't even bring up right then. Yeah. But, I mean, if you're talking about young wide receivers, I think he's probably number 1 right now.
100%. I think he's a guy that can be somebody that stretches the field, can do some different things. He looks physically ready for a true freshman to go out there, and he looks like Marvin Mims out there wearing 17. So, high expectations for him. You mentioned Nick Anderson and Jaden Gibson. Those are 2 guys I'm really excited to see because it feels like those 2 have a really high ceiling. We just haven't seen it yet. Obviously, Nick has been dealing with some injuries. He's healthy. He's had a really good fall camp. I know he's performed well. I think he's caught touchdowns in both scrimmages so far. So he's a guy I think they're counting on. Jaden Gibson sounds like he's had a lot better fall camp than he did spring. So I agree with you, Eddie. That's a group that has a lot of question marks, and I'm still, wondering what does it look like. But it from what we've heard, it sounds a lot more positive than what it maybe did a few weeks ago.
Those are the good. Let's talk about the bad. What position group do you think that you might have gone into the beginning of preseason camp and said, I'm not really worried about it, but maybe you're looking up? And I will say, first off, we should start. I think we both said tight end.
Yeah.
So we're going to go to like 1B, if you will, 1B and I guess 1C. What is it for you? We are both worried about tight end, but what is it for you that maybe you're worried a little bit more than you expected to be?
And I don't know if it's worry necessarily, but the secondary is one that I had really high expectations for, and I still do, but there still seems to be some question marks there. And maybe that's a good thing because they do have a lot of different options there. You look at the safety spot, Billy Bowman's going to start at one position. Who's going to be the other guy? It sounds like it's been a little bit inconsistent play, whether it's Reggie Pearson or Peyton Bowen. Those 2 guys seem like they're kind of fighting for that other spot. Maybe a Key Lawrence sounds like he's been up and down in fall camp, kind of like his career has gone so far. Robert Spears-Jennings. So you want to figure out who's going to start the other safety spot. And same at corner. I would loop that in and say that, hey, you've got a Woody Washington returning, and you know what you're going to get down from him, but who is going to step up and be that other guy? And I think there's probably been some ups and downs. You've got the true freshman in Josiah Wagner. He's a guy that I think they have high hopes for. Maybe he can come in and can play. Gentry Williams is not a name we've heard a ton of in fall camp. I think that there was a obviously large expectations. I mean, I said that I thought he could be an all Big 12 type of player. We haven't heard a whole lot about him. Kendall Dolby's a name that's come up. Can he be a starter? So, again, I don't know how much it is worry as much it is, hey, who are going to be those guys that fill those open starting spots right now?
It's funny, too, because you talk about a secondary, and the 2 guys that may have created the most buzz this preseason are both part of that group in Peyton Bowen and Josiah Wagner.
Yeah. I mean, and 2 true freshmen. And I think that there's a good chance both those guys by the end of the season are playing a lot of football. I don't know if they're starting, but it sounds like both of them are going to be guys that can come in and be contributors and play some sort of role. I just, depending on what it looks like. I mean, you and I talked about Peyton Bowen at length a few episodes ago, but he's a guy that it sounds like he's had a really good fall camp. It's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And I would even say Wagner's probably in that same group.
No doubt. And if you want to check out the in-depth discussion that we had not only about Peyton Bowen, but with Peyton Bowen it is right here on the Soonerscoop.com YouTube page. For me, I think it's hard to go anywhere but defensive line. And I think that it's one of those things that, we've talked about. Ted Roof has talked about, even going all the way back a couple weeks ago at the coaches' luncheon down here in Norman, was the fact that if they want to be good defensively, they're going to have to be good up the middle and on the front. And there's so many of those guys that you just don't know. It's kind of like secondary. It's a little bit like the wide receiver position. I just want to go see those guys play now.
Yeah.
And you want to be able to see what you're going to get out of, not only the guys that are returning in Isaiah Coe and Jordan Kelly, but you want to be able to see what you're going to get out of a DJ Terry. What are you going to get out of guys that are coming in and that Jacob Lacey continues to come on? What are you going to get out of Davon Sears? Haven't heard a whole lot about him during the preseason. So, is that something that you go, well, they're just not necessarily struggling, but it's a different guy each day. Grayson Halton's had a really good a really good preseason. Jonah Lalulu moving inside. So there's plenty of bodies there. You just don't really know yet. And I think that that's why it's such a significant concern going into the preseason is you want to be able to see those guys rack up tackles for loss, get pressure on the quarterback, bat down balls here early, especially in that non-conference portion of the schedule where you should be able to go in and kind of have your way with a bunch of people.
And I think it's hard for the defensive line. We've heard them say we got a lot more depth. They're bigger, physical, but it's hard in practice, I think, to bring that out of these guys because while they are going 100%, you're not as a defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, you are trying to be aggressive and physical and honestly trying to hurt somebody sometimes up front like that. When you're going against your own teammates, you're probably not trying to do that. So I think it's hard for them to maybe stand out in these scrimmages and things like that. So I think that's part of why we haven't heard a ton about them, just standing out. And you and I've said this, they don't have a superstar up front that we know of quite yet. So I think it's more about can they be consistent? Can they, fill those gaps and be guys that can stop the run game? That's something that they struggled with last year. So I think it's a valid concern, and they definitely have more bodies there. That's clear. And I do think that they look bigger, but until we see it on the field, what does it actually look like?
Sure. And, Isaiah Coe talked about the 5 bodies that are over 300 pounds. Ashton Sanders is a guy that he looks the part. Marcus Strong is a guy that looks the part, but do you really want to be relying on them as true freshmen? And I think that would take some of the guys that you're expecting to be contributors, expecting to be performers up on the front, not really meeting up to the standards that you need to be. So it's going to be a kind of a wait and see for Todd Bates' group, but they do have bodies. They do have it seems like it's moving in a positive direction, but, we'll see. So switching gears to the recruiting side of things. High school football has started here in the state of Oklahoma. George, you were out last night at Union Tuttle Stadium, I believe, for the Union preview, which is always really, really good. But this year it was a little bit different in that you had Lee Summit North coming to town. I think there's everybody that is watching this probably knows about Williams Winery making his decision on Monday. You caught up with him afterwards. He was decked out in OU gear, which I can't imagine the meltdown that would have ensued if it was the other way around and a kid from Union had committed to Oklahoma and then went up to Missouri and was wearing a bunch of Missouri gear. So we can leave that for all the Missouri riders up in Columbia. But you did talk to him.
Yeah.
Even despite the decision coming out on Monday, it sounds like Oklahoma's still recruiting him hard.
Yeah, it was a really weird interview, Eddie. One, I didn't expect him to talk. I thought it was going to be one of those situations, say, hey, I'm not talking. But then when he comes out and he's wearing Oklahoma gloves and Oklahoma cleats, I was like, well, we got to get a comment from this guy. And so, a couple of us local media spoke to him, and I don't know, it was just a weird interview. He's kind of a quiet guy. I think that he probably felt a little awkward answering questions about Oklahoma, but that's going to happen when, he commits on Monday to Missouri, and that's the big storyline. A lot of people thought Oklahoma was very strongly in that race. He said that he committed to Missouri over Georgia, not Oklahoma, and so we kind of asked him about that. But, he said, hey, I'm just kind of having fun with it. I'm showing some love to Oklahoma, and, they are still recruiting me, and I think his exact line was, we're going to let the season play out, but I'm committed to Missouri. So it sounds like that recruitment's still open. I'm sure Oklahoma still wants to try for that. When it's the number one player in the country, of course you want to. And I think Miguel Chavis tweeted out, that gift that's like, oh, so
the Dumb and Dumber gift, right?
Yeah, so maybe there still is a chance. We'll see. I'm not buying it just yet. I think Williams was also probably just having a little bit of fun, maybe being a little bit of a troll. But it was definitely interesting. And there were some other guys out there. Obviously, Devon Jordan, the 2024 cornerback at Union, talked to him quite a bit. He's down to 5 schools. Sounds like Oklahoma's kind of leading that group right now. He's a guy that has a really close relationship with Brent Venables. I wrote about that, so you can check that out.
I was going to say, that was something that you wrote about, and it sounds like Brent Venables is extremely active in that recruitment.
Yeah, it was interesting. I asked Devon after the game, which, by the way, this is my video, so I'm coming for your job, Edward. But,
I put this video together in the Premiere Pro, and I feel like I'm pretty safe right now. We'll see. We'll see. Although I don't know, I might get fired. Kerry might fire me because the white balance does look excellent.
Yeah, you're welcome. So, but anyways, he was great. It was funny when I was interviewing him after the scrimmage. I asked him, what's your relationship like with Jay Valai? And he goes, oh, I have a great relationship with Jay, but I think I actually have a closer relationship with Brent. And I said, oh, really? Tell me a little bit about that. And he said, of all the head coaches that he's spoken to in his recruitment, Brent is the one that communicates with him the most. And he said he's talking to him every couple days. So it sounds like they have a really close relationship. I don't know when that decision date's going to be. It sounds like Devon doesn't even know yet. Said he wants to get it down to a couple more schools. Sounds like Alabama's also still very much in that race. So we'll see what happens with him. I think he's a guy that was pretty impressive yesterday. Went up against Isaiah Mosey, the 2025 wide receiver out of Lee Summit North, that Oklahoma is also recruiting. So he's a guy that's definitely talented. A little bit shorter, 5'10", I think, about 170, but a physical guy that I think Oklahoma would be happy to have.
No doubt about it. He looks the part. Union's primed for another really good season. I was up there for the I think 6 or 7 overtime game a year ago over at Broken Arrow Stadium. So I would imagine Coach Frederick will have that team right back in 6A1 contention here before too long. Last night I went out to Carl Albert High School, and it was probably the best scrimmage that we had here in the Metro, as Kevin Sperry leading the way for the Titans, the defending 5A state champions. He is he didn't really do a whole lot. I think that, like, with these scrimmages, you're starting to see a bunch of guys kind of take that NFL preseason look at it, as far as you just don't want to get anybody injured, and that was the case with Kevin Sperry last night. Marcus James, the transfer from McGinnis, Oklahoma offer, outside linebacker, we went and spent time with him over the spring. And then Tristan Haynes is another guy that made a lot of plays last night. Trinae Washington made a lot of plays last night for Carl Albert. I mean, the list goes on and on and on of guys that are going to be dynamic players for them coming up this season. Coach Dunn has a really good thing going over at Carl Albert. I think that's, and wait for it, pause, 3, 2, 1, obvious. You had Xavier Robinson throwing guys last night, the Oklahoma running back commit. And, that was the first time, George, that I was able to see him play in a live action. He moves so well for such a big guy. It's really, truly unbelievable. He had a bunch of really nice plays last night, and then, found the end zone. They ended up playing 21-21 with UConn. I think if that was a game that they were playing all their starters, it would have been, something. I think it would have gotten a little out of hand, probably.
Yeah.
The whole thing was loaded, though. Andy Bass was there from Heritage Hall. Nate Roberts and Cooper Alexander were there from Washington, the defending 2A state champion, if I could spit it out there. They were obviously extremely impressive last night. I don't know how anybody in the state, especially at the 2A level, is going to game plan for the powerhouse that is Washington. So it was a really good night out there. And then Andy Bass, as I said just a minute ago, he found the end zone a couple times. That Heritage Hall offense is primed for another, I think, record-setting year with him at the helm. It's kind of funny, too. He plays quarterback for him. So it's basically either he's passing it, and he's a good passer. He's probably a little bit underrated as far as a passer goes. I know Syracuse has offered him as a quarterback, and then he just pulls it every time. Like, he's so deadly in the run game. He's going to be an extremely good player, and he has his decision coming up on August 24th, the week before they actually played Jaden Nickens in Millwood. So it's
lots of talent.
The state of high school football in Oklahoma is extremely strong. I think Josh has already talked about that many a times on the U40, and especially in that 2025 class. When you look at a guy like Nate Roberts, who just decommitted from Notre Dame, it was also kind of interesting too, because as Washington got done last night, he went over and he was talking to Kevin Sperry. I got some video of it up on the Crimson Corner on the message boards. And I don't know, it just feels very comfortable. And I think that the writing is kind of on the wall. This is Andy Bass breaking off a nice touchdown run last night for the Chargers. So, I mean, you had four of maybe the premier high school football programs in the state when you were talking about Carl Albert, Heritage Hall, Washington. And then you also had a team in Tuttle that was there last night who perennially is a state gold ball contender. So it was a really good scrimmage. It felt good to get back out there underneath the, I guess, Thursday night lights this week. But everything kind of kicks off next week for the state of Oklahoma with week 0 action. Yeah,
no, I'm excited to get out. I really want to watch Carl Albert. I know we just rolled a ton of clips on them, but just the amount of guys over there that they have. I know I got to see, a guy like Tristan Haynes and Kevin Sperry out at the C4 event a few months ago, and I was super impressed by them. So for them to team up, and obviously Xavier Robinson, and man, I think Andy Bass is one of the more underrated players. It's fun. It's weird to say that, but he's a guy that if Oklahoma ends up landing him, I think he's going to end up being a really, really good player, and he's a guy that I expect a huge season from at Heritage Hall.
He is. They are going to score a lot of points this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Brett Bogert and that offensive staff probably about as good as any in the state of Oklahoma. I'd put it up there with Laura Montgomery and what they do with the Bixby Spartan program.
Yeah, so, Bishop Kelly, JJ Tapana, shout out.
Okay, interesting. Well, how are we looking this year for the Comets?
I was told yesterday they have a transfer running back from Jinx, so they feel pretty good about themselves. Now, I don't think they'll be on Carl Albert's level, but I think they'll make the playoffs, which is a good year for Bishop.
Are we gonna? Do you attend the Catholic War between Bishop Kelly and McGinnis?
It's in Tulsa this year, and I think OU plays in Norman the next day, so probably not. But I've been invited. I've been told I am invited to come and do play-by-play for games, which I will not be doing. Sorry, JJ, but maybe in the future.
Interesting. So that was what we were up to on Thursday night here in the state of Oklahoma. There was one other note that we wanted to get into, and it's something that you've done a little bit of Big J journalism.
Big J, yeah.
And getting the payouts for the teams that will be on Oklahoma's non-conference schedule. I think if you look at the Arkansas State number, which you can read the story on Soonerscoop.com, you look at it and you go, that's interesting. Arkansas State, how much are they getting paid to come to Norman?
$1.35 million. It's a big number when you think about it. Last year they paid Kent State $1.5 million. They also paid UTEP $700,000. So those numbers are always high. I think I was looking up last year. Alabama paid one of theirs. I think Alabama played. I can't remember who they played, but they paid $2 million for their non-conference, one of their non-conference. Georgia also played Kent State last year and also paid $2 million. So that's
Kent State's keeping the lights on is what they're doing.
Exactly. So that's usually how it goes down. Tulsa this year will pay Oklahoma $300,000 because it's at Tulsa. But when Oklahoma goes back to Tulsa, or when Tulsa comes to Oklahoma in 2030, Oklahoma will pay Tulsa $300,000, and then when Tulsa comes back again in 2033, Oklahoma will pay $1 million. So Tulsa's going to get $1 million out of this series, but Tulsa will pay this year. And then SMU this year is getting $400,000 from Oklahoma. But when Oklahoma goes to SMU in 2027, barring conference realignment, SMU will pay Oklahoma $400,000. So that's how it goes. I don't know if everybody caught on to that. You can read it at Soonerscoop.com. I did a much better
It's a lot easier to read something like that than it is to talk about that.
Yes,
I feel you on that. It is, that's a lot of Coney Islander that whoever within the Tulsa program can go ahead and buy. So that is about it. When we talk to you next week, Oklahoma will have started classes. They will have started everything that kind of goes into that, and that's moving practice to the evenings. So we will be back with practice reports and all of that kind of good stuff when we reconvene next week. For George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. Y'all have a good weekend out there.